The Dad's place at corner of Napier Road and Wanneroo Road, after the house he built a wine cellar. He used quite a lot of he did use most of the stones from that original school, which was the Church of England church school in the block that he had purchased in 1929. Well, it was purchased in 1923, but Dad got it from his brother, or between the two of them. He got it in 1929. He used the school, carted that up, and just behind the house he excavated with a horse and it was sort of a drag line, a big scoop with the horse and a man behind the scoop. He scooped that out to about 6 feet under the ordinary ground level, and then made a he went out in the bush then and cut timbers. Actually, all his timbers was cut by axe. Well, he'd cut the timber down, saw up to the various lengths he wanted, and the timber was trimmed by a broad axe. The broad axe was what the sleeper cutters used in the timber country, and it was quite a wide, not a wide, the blade was quite long. Instead of the ordinary axe of about 6 inches, 150 millimetres, this broad axe had a much longer blade of about 300 to 350 millimetres, or about 15 inches wide. And there was either a right or a left hand, depended on what you were, which way the handle was put onto the blade. Well, the Dad trimmed all these timbers and so forth, and also where he had excavated the 6 foot under the normal surface of the ground, he used the stone to make a sort of it wasn't concrete those days, but a stone and mortar up from the base of the thing up to the ground level was made of the stone. So he utilised all the stones from the old school. And of course, before doing that, he'd put timbers in for the building to go up higher than normal. So he made his cellar out of there and started making wines. Behind the actual cellar, wine cellar, he'd also made concrete. That was the first that was used in concrete as far as the building around there was concerned. He built 2 vats, 2 big vats. This is where the grapes would be crushed and fermented. He had purchased I remember the old machine, it was a grape crushing machine of German origin. It had a tray of about 4 by 4 feet on top, or 120 by 120 millimetres, a big tray where you'd empty the grapes on top. Underneath that was the part that used to crush the grapes was operated, you'd have to hand turn the machine, and there was a big wheel that you'd turn, which in turn would turn a smaller wheel. The ratio between the big and the small was about 30 or 40 to 1, so by turning the bigger wheel, which was a big diameter, this would cog into the smaller wheel, which would turn much more, 30 to 40 times faster. That was connected through an axle, and inside the machine was the crushing part that used to crush the grapes. And they were 6 blades attached to the axle that used to go at this very high speed. And as you'd sort of push the grapes in from the top tray through a small hole, they used to fall onto the revolving blades, which are made of copper, and that would crush the grapes. Underneath was a grating, underneath the machine when the grapes were crushed was a grating, all made of copper. This machine sat on the top of these big vats, which probably in all held about, I would say about 1,000 gallons, roughly. That would fill up with the crushed grapes and so forth. Now, The stems didn't go in. The stems of the grapes didn't go into the vat itself because the stems are very sour, very acidy. But the machine was so built that they did a couple of revolutions inside, and when they were fully free of grapes and quite clean and nothing left on the stems itself, they were thrown off through the machine into a collection bucket which you threw out. They weren't used at all. When the vat was filled with you'd have different grapes. You'd never mix grapes. That'd be the black type, the Burgundy, and the Muscatels would be different. They were a white wine for Muscatel grapes. But the Burgundy, Shiraz grapes were sometimes mixed together. When the vat was practically full, you'd take the crusher away, put it aside, or maybe put it onto the next vat, and then there were wooden gratings put onto the already crushed grapes and were locked into place by bricks that had been sort of cemented into the top of the vat. They were slided in with two halves, but they were wedged in, keyed in. So what actually happened, you'd think that the whole thing was a boiling process, but it wasn't. It was just the fermentation, and everything would start sort of fermenting. The grapes had been crushed after about 2 days, and if you didn't have these things, there's a lot of sort of froth and that would come up, and the whole thing would overflow. But with the fact that you've had these slats in and big gratings on the top, used to stop it, and all you could see was bubbling. Well, that would be left there for a few weeks until it was fermented, and then it was drawn off. There was an opening or a tap on the cellar side of the vats where the crushing took place. That was all drained off and pumped into barrels, and then that would remain there, and then every so often they were pumped into other barrels and so forth. And that was just plain grape juice. But to sell most of those wines, one would have to fortify the wines with grape spirits, which was purchased from, I think my father used to get that from Valencia Vineyards in Caversham, which is still going, I believe. They were the only people that made the actual grape spirits, and that was through distillation of the grape juice and so forth, through distillation. But to acquire the spirits, one would have to go through customs. Couldn't just go and buy it, because spirits is an alcohol, and it's very, potent stuff. So I don't know where, but you'd have to get permission. Of course, the custom people have to come out, see the amount of wine that you wanted to fortify, that was to make it alcoholic, and work out the amount of spirits that you needed. So Dad would have to arrange with the customs department and an officer to go out to Caversham, to Valencia Vineyard. They would also, he would collect the spirits, come out, and they would accompany him every inch of the way, because it was quite potent stuff. You could put a bit aside or something and sell it. But no, they were there from the time he bought the stuff at Valencia till the time that he mixed it in with the wines. They were there all the time.
You're talking about
and they verified the fact that it was done in the right way.
It's the 1920s, 1930s?
Oh, 19 up to 19, well into the 30s. And yes. Yes, one thing Dad was well known by in the 30s, around about the 30s. He had a notice there. I think he used to call it, originally he called it the Key Vineyard. I think then he called it Peter's Vineyard. But alongside his main notice for the vineyard, he had a sign there saying, "Free wine tomorrow." Well, people used to come in, the next day, sort of after seeing it the day before, and not take any notice that it was still there, and they'd come in to Dad and said, "Oh, we see a notice out there when we went past yesterday, you had free wine tomorrow," so we decided to come in and see if you got the free wine. And Dad says, "Well, go outside and have a look at the notice. It's still free wine tomorrow."